Welcome to Passive Aggressive Income. This program may contain strong language. The content may not be suitable for audiences under the age of 17. We understand many of our listeners may not agree with all of our personal viewpoints. We in no way, shape, or form mean to be offensive to anyone. Our show notes will provide all of our source material included for each episode. Now let's get passive aggressive.
Hello and welcome back to the Passive Aggressive Income Podcast. I'm your host, Lexie, and with me is Mims. Last week, we learned all about how to find and vet tenants and get your listing up and ready to go for long-term tenants. Mims was awesome telling us all of the information about that. This week, I'm going to dive into my expertise on short-term rentals and mid-term rentals. So quite different than being a landlord of long-term tenants. So I'm really excited to discuss all of that. So
I'm so excited to learn from you. This is going to be as equally beneficial for me as it is to people that are tuning in. So I'm super happy that you're doing this because I'm about to take notes.
yeah. Yeah, I think
I'm
it's so
ready.
helpful. I wish that I had listened to a podcast about short-term rentals and what it's like to manage one before I decided to start one, because there's a lot that goes into it, and you really want to make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, and I almost feel like short-term rentals may be a little bit more harder. Maybe
Yeah, yeah,
harder. Yeah.
it's a lot of work. It's very hands-on. Yeah, so I guess let's just jump into it. First off, what are short-term rentals? Short-term rental is a place where you can stay for under 27 nights. They're furnished, typically. If you're looking at like Airbnb, that's, I think, the main platform that you would be looking for a short-term rental. It's a place that people often go to spend a weekend or maybe spend a week on vacation in a new area, and they need some place to stay that, hopefully has some amenities like a full kitchen, or maybe they want a local experience and they want to rent a room in someone's house. We talked about house hacking previously on this podcast. That's an option too. So that's what a short-term rental is. So your responsibilities as a host of a short-term rental includes obviously having a unit available, furnishing it, having your listing up on the various sites that people would go to find a short-term rental, being available to ask questions and recommendations. So one thing to note is that although you are a landlord, you're really a host. That is your title. You are very hands-on. You are dealing with the people, you're checking them in. You are, in addition, you have some consumable things that you offer. So like soaps and shampoos and conditioners and maybe oil and seasonings and other things like that. It's not required, but it's just a really nice touch if you run a short-term rental to have, some like, teas or some fun drinks in the fridge to offer them that just makes them feel more welcome.
Mhm.
In addition, your responsibilities would be checking in guests and checking in with the guests throughout the stay. So you can, an option is to do a contactless check-in where you leave a key in a lockbox, or maybe you have a key code, a keypad on your lock, and you technically don't even have to see the tenants at all. It depends on your style. Sometimes it's really nice to see the people and let them know that, hey, I'm your host, I'm a real person, please don't destroy my property. And
Yeah.
other times it's like when you're running a short-term rental, you're having people check in every couple days, and so that takes a lot of time to do that. So when I ran a short-term rental, I would do both if I was around and available and could make myself presentable for a couple minutes to go talk with the guests as they're checking in. And that was a really nice touch. Otherwise, if it didn't work out with the time schedule, a lot of people look for contactless check-in where they can just check in, not have to deal with anybody. Fellow introverts out there, that is definitely my preference as a guest.
I
And
have something to add to that real quick. So I went to Puerto Rico with my husband and my brother-in-law, and we stayed at a ton of Airbnbs, and the first one was a super interesting way for us to get our key. Um, there was a fence where the apartment was in, and it was like apartment. So none of them were like long term. It was an Airbnb style, and the all the locks were on the fence. So you were given a lock with a number on it on the message for you to find, because we got there at like 3 in the morning. And obviously that's really hard for that person to be there to give you a key to what you said before, and especially if that's happening often. So we were standing out there trying to find which, because there was like 30 of them, just standing out there in a different state. Essentially, I kind of consider a different country, but it's not, it's part of the 50. Anyways, and our taxi driver was like helping us find which one was for
no.
us, because there were so many. It was so embarrassing. And I'm like, I just need sleep. I just need sleep. It was so
Yeah,
long.
that sounds like a
But yeah, I
nightmare.
definitely, yeah, that was one way to do it. I mean, we got in, so
Yeah. Yeah, a hot tip if you're planning on doing like contactless check-ins is just make it as easy as possible for your guests checking in. There's a place if specifically on Airbnb for check-in instructions, you can write really detailed instructions on like where exactly the lockbox is, what the code is, if the little door sticks, like what do you do
Mhm.
about that?
Mhm.
And if you know if everything else fails, then be available, know what time around that they're coming so you can at least be by your phone. So if they have issues and they need to call you, they're not just stranded out of their rental.
Yeah.
Yes. And then other responsibilities include things like turnover. So with turnover, that means you are, restocking the consumables, you're stripping the beds, you're doing all of the laundry, putting clean towels out, doing all of the cleaning, making sure you don't have any like dirty plates and silverware that got put away. And so it's pretty involved. So my biggest piece of advice with running a short-term rental if you're considering running a short-term rental is just that it is a time commitment. It really is something that you're going to have to be kind of planning your schedule around if you're going to be running it 100% yourself. So moving on to the listings, this is exciting. I love creating listings for my various rentals. When I bought my first duplex, I was living in the upper unit, and then the lower unit we turned into a short-term rental. So it was really nice that we were living above the rental because we can kind of keep an eye on things. And like I said earlier, people are here on vacation. They're having a good time. They're trying to party. And sometimes things can get a little bit out of hand. So it was really nice for us to be living above it because we can kind of keep an eye on things. And not only that, we let our guests know, hey, if you need anything, we're right above you. You know, we're just a knock away. It's fine. And then they're like, oh, the owner's here. We gotta be on our best behavior.
I feel like that's a great thing for them to know. And yeah, just to respect the space a little bit more. So I like that you do that.
Yeah. So as far as what the listing should look like, the biggest thing that you can do is having really professional photos. We talked a little bit about this in our last episode, talking about how to create your listing. A lot of the same things apply here. So you want shots of the outside, shots of every room, shots of any special amenities, like if you have a pool or a hot tub, people want to see that. The laundry situation, especially if it's shared, just more photos, the better. One thing that's a little bit different with short-term rentals versus if you're listing a long-term or unfurnished unit is that having some detail shots are really nice. So we offered free coffee. And so we took a picture of like the Keurig and all the K-cups and
Oh.
any cute like little table decorations. Those are just really nice touches that aren't super necessary, but just kind of show your guests that you're putting in the extra mile to make them comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then having a creative name is really fun. It's not required You can just say, hey, 2 bedroom in St. Paul near downtown, and that's probably adequate, but it's always, I don't know, I feel like it kind of gives your rental a little bit of a personality if you can come up with a fun name. So the short-term rental that we had, our style is very black, white, gray, simple, clean, modern. And so that's how we furnished and sort of designed our rental unit. And so we called it the monochrome home, which is fun, it's
Oh,
descriptive, and it rhymes. So it's easy for people to remember that.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
so cute.
Yeah, so the monochrome home, we were super it's so funny because when we were like Alex and I are so bad at naming things, and we're like, how about the monochrome house? And then we talked to one of our friends, they're like, are you fucking kidding me? Like this opportunity, the monochrome home. We're like, wow, we're so dumb. Like,
That's
thank
so funny
you.
that's so funny you said that because we just got complimented on our name for our podcast and I'm like, we're doing something right.
Yeah, we are. Someone left such an awesome comment that passive aggressive income is an intriguing podcast name. So that felt good. So that was all Mims. I will not take credit for the name. So if you're bad at
You
names
okayed
like
it,
I am,
so
yeah,
you put
I
it in our
approved it, yeah.
yeah,
If you're
so
bad at
it was
names,
a
reach out to friends because they might be better at it. Take some time to
yeah,
think about it.
I I asked my friend group what sounds better, and almost all of them said passive aggressive income. So definitely, if you're trying to name something, go and ask people because I mean it sounds different when other people say it. Maybe you'll be like, oh, you know.
Yeah, my favorite thing to do is like Instagram polls. If I need to make any like life decisions, I'm like, let me put an Instagram poll up. Like, should I get baby bangs? Let me check with my Instagram.
The followers will know.
Yes. So that's a hot
I
tip.
love that. Yeah.
Um, but yes, anyway, so back to the listing. Having a detailed description is super important. Talking about information on the area. So if you're near some coffee shops or like walking distance to a supermarket, that's really important information to include. And then also if you're in a safe area, like mention that or talk about any of the security features that you have. Like we have security cameras up around the property. That might freak some people out, but it also might make people feel more safe and just like, oh, if anything happens, like that's there. And then obviously talk about the unit. So talk about, how many beds, like we described, we have like really comfortable queen nectar mattresses. And this
Oh,
was like newly renovated in 2019. And um, so talk about like the positive features of your rental and just sort of the overall vibe, in addition to just like the important information that they should be knowing about like how many people it sleeps and all of those things.
so do you have cameras in the
No.
actual unit? Oh, it's just
No,
outside.
yeah, that's super creepy. Nope. Number one,
Yeah.
illegal. Number two, just super creepy. And I don't want to know what people do in my rentals. We just had one, we had a camera pointed in the like shared garage, driveway,
Oh.
side yard, and then one pointed at the like front door, like entrance area, and then that was it.
I've
So
always, because I've spent so many times or so many stays in Airbnbs, and I've always wondered if that was an actual thing that people have cameras inside of it. So I'm like,
yeah, you're
is there
definitely not supposed to. I'm sure there's some weirdos out there that do, but yeah, that's not okay. And we always
no.
let our like guests know ahead of time. And it's actually something that I think they ask you on Airbnb is if you have security cameras, just like let your guests know where and
Oh,
let them know ahead of time, just so they're aware
oh,
of it.
I like that. That's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about Airbnb. Let's jump into that and some of the different platforms. Airbnb is my favorite. It's, I think, where we've gotten like, I don't know, probably 90% of our bookings. But the other one that we used is VRBO. It's very similar to Airbnb. It's just kind of another place for people to find short-term rentals. I find that that's a bit more popular for like fancy vacation homes in, especially in
Oh.
like tropical places, but we were listed on both. Both are free to list your unit. You can list as many units as you want, and it's great. Um, I feel more comfortable using Airbnb as a host because you can glean more information about the tenant ahead of time before you accept their booking. So, with Airbnb, they do hide like sensitive information, but you can see all of the reviews that people have had previous. You can see there's a section where they can write a bio. You can see where they live if they have their location. So it's sort of up to the guest how much info they put into that. But on VRBO, they don't even have like a bio section. And so it kind of feels uncomfortable that you're like, who am I actually talking with right now and renting to? And also we
Mm-hmm.
got a lot more scam inquiries on VRBO than on Airbnb. So
What do you
yeah, I'm
mean?
not sure if other people have that experience, but I just, for those reasons, I feel more comfortable on Airbnb. And
Like
then,
a person was trying to scam you, or
just like, I mean, you can tell it's like, can you kindly let me know if your rental is available for these dates? I can pay lots of money or whatever. I don't know exactly
oh,
what the verbiage, like, you can tell it's
sure.
super obvious, but it's just kind of annoying when you're like, oh, a fucking request, and it's spam.
Oh my God.
So yeah, just be aware. I mean, use your common sense, use your
Right.
judgment. But also, Airbnb has the superhost system, which I think is amazing. What it means to be a superhost, I believe it's a 4.8 rating or higher, and that's you as a host. So if you have multiple properties that you have listed on Airbnb, that's the average of all of them. So I
Oh,
think it's 4.8. It might be 4.75, but I'm not quite sure about that. Um, and you have to maintain that rating within a certain amount of time and have a certain amount of bookings within that time. So you aren't eligible to be a super host until you have at a minimum, I think 3 ratings or like a number of nights booked within like the quarter. So it
okay.
kind of depends if you're doing like longer term stays or short term stays, but Airbnb reviews that every quarter and they'll review it to see if you're eligible. What are the benefits of being a super host? Your listings are shown first. They're shown at the top when people are, for example, searching St. Paul. I'm a super host, so my listings will pop up first, which is great because then that's like the first opportunity people have. You're not like 10 pages in. And
Right.
it also just gives the guest a sense of trust in you as a host and in your rental because they're not just like going in blind, or especially with like new listings, they know what to expect and they know that you're someone who's trustworthy and that your unit's clean. And then also you get perks as a super host. I currently have a $100 Airbnb gift card that I'm planning on using in the next month or two. And I think you get that every year. I'm not quite sure, but I know we've used it a few times. So it's just, and it incentivizes you to have a good rental and be a good landlord.
Yeah, that's freaking awesome.
Hmm. So accepting and vetting guests, this is a big one, and this is something that definitely takes practice. I'm sure as it took practice for you just vetting people as a landlord for a long-term tenants, it's the same way with running a short-term rental. So what we do is ask a list of questions. You can you can kind of do whatever process, but this is what works for us. I ask, what do you like about the unit? What is the purpose of your stay? We have a list of house rules listed on Airbnb. We will confirm that they read and agree to them and even copy and paste them into the message. And then you can, ask other things as well. But I kind of feel like it doesn't matter as much what you ask as much as you're just trying to open a line of communication. You can gauge what kind of guest they're going to be by what their answers are, how thorough they are, if they're responding to each one of your questions, and how quickly they respond. Um, and you can kind of, that's your first, like, I don't know, way to like get the general vibe of what they're going to be, and trust your gut feeling, because we've had people that are just like almost like too agreeable, and they're not asking any questions back, and they're just like, oh yeah, that's fine, that's totally fine. And I don't know, you just get weird vibes, and those tend to be the guests that we've had problems with. And because it's a short-term rental where you're running through different guests so often, like multiple a week, if you're managing it that way, you don't really have time, or it's not really appropriate to meet them ahead of time or in person. So this is sort of
Right.
your only opportunity to see if you feel comfortable with them living in your place for whatever number of days.
And I like that you said that if they're not asking questions, that's sort of like a red flag to you, because when I do showings for my long-term units, I don't get annoyed when people ask me a shit ton of questions. For me, that makes me feel like they're very interested and that they are thinking ahead and that they're actually thinking for themselves. They're
Yes.
thinking, oh, okay, well, I should be asking about this and that. And it's I know a lot of people get annoyed with that. I don't understand why. That just means that they're actually like interested and they want to
Yeah.
know, and
They're
there's nothing
making sure
wrong
it's a
with
good fit for them.
that. Mm-hmm.
But I will
Right.
say there can be a line that you can cross as a guest who's asking so many questions that it kind of makes you wonder, like, is this person going to be super needy? Are they going to be asking things
Oh,
of me the entire weekend? Are these questions that
mm,
are already answered if they read the description of my listing? So those are,
right.
it can go too far.
For sure. Yeah. Like if they should know that, just
Mhm.
by, thinking about actually is a good point, because I did do a tour and I showed them the whole layout of this unit, right? And I told them this exterior door goes down this flight of stairs, and then this exterior doors goes with that flight of stairs, and went around the property and I showed them this and that. And the lady was like, can I go back upstairs? I just don't understand this whole door situation. And I'm like, okay.
I mean, we were pretty thorough, but okay.
Yeah, super thorough. Like I showed door. Let me show
Yeah.
you the stairs. Let's go outside. Yeah. So I definitely understand where, yeah, it does kind of get annoying if they're kind of silly questions that you can clearly read on there, or maybe just a shit ton of irrelevant questions. But if they're just trying to get a gauge of what it's going to be like, or
Mhm.
obvious questions, then that's a green flag for me.
Yeah, absolutely. What I would suggest with your any rental like location, that any platform I should say that you're listing your rental on, put on the filter that makes the guest request to book instead of automatically reserve your rental. Because I believe you have to check that box, because the platform wants as many bookings as possible, because then they're making money. So you want to make sure when you're setting up your listing that you click request to book, make guests talk to you, put in a request, then you can evaluate, ask some questions, and then ultimately accept them if you feel comfortable. Um, but something to keep in mind is that you might get penalized for not accepting guests if you don't have a good reason. Like if you are, you know, if you feel like unsafe, or like they're asking for information that is like sensitive before they've like accepted the booking, then that's something that you can go to Airbnb and say, yeah, I'm denying this because like this reason. And Airbnb has all these filters where if guests are asking for your phone number or email, or trying to give them their contact information, Airbnb will automatically redact that from the messages, because they don't want their guests booking off platform, because then they don't get the payout of having that guest book. So they're redacting that information. So if things like that are happening and you're like, this is kind of sketchy, like I don't feel comfortable, it'll automatically pop up on your message with them, and it'll say, hey, is this like safe booking, or like do you feel comfortable, do you want to proceed? And so if you deny it, then you have a reason.
Oh, that's actually really, really cool. I like that they're looking out for you.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice for sure because then it's like, oh yes, I don't need to get penalized because this person's being weird and I don't want to accept their booking. They're like automatically recognizing that.
Cool.
Mhm. The rating system is super important on Airbnb. This is where, like I said, it has a role in whether you can become a super host or not, but it's also just from the guest side, super important for people looking at Airbnbs. Like, I don't stay anywhere that has less than like a 4.775, even a 4.7, I would say is pretty low.
Oh,
Um, the thing is, well, I'll jump to that in a minute, but so when you start a new listing, you have to get 3 stays and have 3 reviews before it actually shows up as a star rating on your property. So you want to get those as quickly as possible and ask for reviews. If someone
hmm.
leaves, a lot of time they're like going back home or moving on to the next part of their vacation, and they don't think about leaving you a review. I believe you have 2 weeks to leave a review after checkout. Um, and so if no one leaves your review once they check out, message them and just say, hey, thanks so much for staying with us. If they left the property, great, then let them know, like, thank you for leaving it clean. It looks awesome. You guys were amazing. It was a pleasure to have you. Let them know that you're leaving them a review. We like to say, we just left you a 5-star review. Hope you will do the same for us. And then that incentivizes them to, like, number one, think about you and then leave you a 5-star rating.
Yeah, I actually really love that because I'm a very bad Airbnb now that I think about it because I don't leave reviews and I promise you now I'm gonna do that moving forward, thinking of you.
Yes.
But that would be very helpful if I did receive those messages because I don't
Mhm.
think that I have gotten that often. And I feel like if I did get a reminder of uh or if somebody's saying, hey, I'm going to review you and you were an awesome guest or whatever, then I'd be like, oh, you too, I'm gonna do that for you too. So I
Yeah.
definitely love
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, it makes a difference. And it's such a simple thing for you to do as a host. It takes like a minute to send a message, and
Hmm.
those just having good reviews and consistent positive reviews is really important. So with the
Hmm.
rating system, you can leave an overall rating, and then you also can leave up 1 to 5 star ratings on location, accuracy, cleanliness, check-in, communication, and then value for your unit. So what is shown on your listing when people are looking at, like, deciding where they want to stay is an average of those. So making sure that, like, all of your boxes are checked, that you're pricing yourself correctly, that your unit is clean, that you're responding to messages quick, and things like that is really important. So my problem with the rating system on Airbnb is that um anything lower than like a 4.75 is generally a shitty rental. But guests don't realize
Oh,
that a 4-star rating is bad. Like, when you think 1 to 5, a four
yeah.
star rating is fine, right? But on Airbnb, that's kind of detrimental. And I think a better system would be like a scale of 1 to 10, where it's just a bigger variety. If you didn't have a perfect stay, you can let the host know, and when you're leaving a review, you can leave private feedback that's not shown to the public. But if you'd
Mhm.
recommend the place, I would say just leave 5 stars off the bat.
So
Um,
what is it 1 to 5 then? Or
yeah,
how
one
does
to five stars. You can't do half stars. You can't do anything like that. So it's 1 to 5 stars, and then 1 to 5 stars on each of those specifications too.
got it. Got it.
So that's a little bit about short-term rentals, the rating system, how you should set up your listing, what you can expect from guests, and sort of just the whole process of accepting guests, and how to move forward with that.
Excellent job. I feel like I've learned a lot. I'm like storing it all in. And for me as a traveler, because I use Airbnb, so that's really helpful for me. And just another thing to learn as far as uh, using this passive income stream as well. I don't know if I'd ever do that, what you do, because it seems like you really have to be involved.
Yeah,
So I applaud you, hats off to you.
thank
But
you.
oh, which reminds me of a question that I've been wanting to ask you. What made you decide on doing short-term rentals rather than what I do, which is a long-term rental?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's definitely not something that we had planned to do. We talked about it when we were buying our first duplex, like, oh, maybe it would be fun to do an Airbnb, but we weren't set on the idea. We were planning on just doing long-term tenants. But then when we bought our house, the housing market was going crazy and rents weren't really keeping up with the price of housing. So when we moved in, we were sort of crunching the numbers and looking at what a standard rent for a two-bedroom, one-bathroom house would be. And it didn't make sense. And we were thinking if we move out and we have two long-term tenants in our long-term tenants in both of our units, that's not going to cover all of our costs. It's not going to cover the mortgage and expenses and everything. And so we were thinking like we need to get creative. How do
Mhm.
we make more money so it makes financial sense for us to have this duplex even? And so that's where we turned to Airbnb because with furnished units, you can charge more. With shorter stays, you can charge more. And with like it lots of turnover, you can charge more. And then on Airbnb, people are staying in the summer, like Minnesota is a great place to stay in like the spring, summer, fall. And then in the winter, people don't really want to stay here as much. So you can adjust your prices seasonally. Um,
Mhm.
and so all of those things, what we were looking at, what could we actually charge for like a stay over a weekend on Airbnb for a place of similar size and condition. And we're
Mhm.
like, damn, like we could make a lot of money doing this. And like this actually would make sense for what we're doing. And it ended up being amazing for us with how much money we were making, especially in the summers. I think our best month we made like 31 or 3,200 where yeah, I know, at the time a long-term tenant for the year without it being furnished or anything, I think we could maybe only get like I don't know 12 or 1,300. That's increased now since then. Rents have kind of bumped up and kept now are more with like market housing market prices, but so that's like over double what we will be making in like especially the warm months. But then again, during the winters we had some slow seasons. We dropped our prices quite a bit. We had a little bit of vacancies between guests. So on the low side, I think we were making, I don't know, 1,800, 2,000. But it kind of averaged out where it just made a lot of sense for us to do that. So I mean that's definitely the benefit. You're putting all of this work in, you're very hands-on, you're checking in with these people, you're dealing with lots and lots of turnover, but you make a lot of money doing it too.
For sure. I mean, you have to get paid for all the things, all the extra things that you're doing.
Yes.
Like I'm providing a long-term rental, but I'm not providing them with a bed. I'm not providing them with, towels and shit like that. Like
Right.
it's a whole experience when it comes to how you're doing it. So that's
Mm-hmm.
awesome. I'm glad it's
Yeah.
working out for
And
you.
right, there's a quite a bit of an initial investment into all of the furniture and wall hangings and everything. I think for our two-bedroom, one bath rental that we started off with, I think we spent $7,000 furnishing it to get started. And then like, we would add things here and there and you're paying for consumables. So those are repeated costs. So those are all things that you have to keep in mind in addition when you're pricing your unit.
For
And
sure.
it's a lot of figuring out how to price your rental too. It's looking at other Airbnbs in your area that's, sort of similar, better or worse condition, various sizes. And it's a lot of trial and error. And especially with the seasonal pricing, you just got to be like constantly moving and seeing, am I getting lots of inquiries? Am I getting no one interested? And eventually finding that when we first listed our rental, we had way, way, way underpriced ourselves because we were just trying to get those first three bookings to get good reviews. And
Right.
because of that, we had some less than desirable guests. So it's figuring that out where if you have a nice place, you can charge more. But
For sure.
once you become a super host, then people will see the value in your pricing too.
Right. Love that.
Yeah, so that is a bit about short-term rentals. I hope that was helpful for people who are interested and also on the guest side. What kind of guest should you be? What are your responsibilities as a guest, and what are the things that we have to deal with as hosts? So next up, we'll move into midterm rentals. Midterm rentals is a phrase I believe myself and my husband coined. It's definitely a strategy that people do, but I think it is pretty niche compared to like running a short-term rental or having long-term tenants. So since there's no official like definition, what a midterm rental means to me is someone that allows tenants to stay 28 or more nights, but we're not signing year-long leases. So typically the average, so it's sort of like month to month, except we will usually ask people who are interested what their time frame is, and that'll often be like 3 months or 4 months, and then we're flexible with it. If it's available and they're a good tenant, having them stay longer than that. So all the things like that are included in the lease. But your responsibilities as someone who is a landlord of a midterm rental is quite different than an Airbnb or a short-term rental, and also quite different than a long-term rental. So what that looks like is there's still a lot more work that goes into running a midterm rental than with having long-term tenants, because you have a lot of turnover, and you're kind of checking in with people more often, and you're doing your like unit inspections more often, but in a lot of ways it shares the same responsibilities. But you're less of a host, like with the short-term rental. You don't need to provide like seasonings and oil, and you don't need to have like your coffees and fancy drinks in the fridge, because people aren't expecting that of you. You're not hosting them, you're their landlord.
Right.
With finding tenants, there's a couple different platforms that you can use, which I'll get into a little bit later, but that's one of your main responsibilities, obviously, is filling the unit. And then signing leases. I recommend that you have a signed lease even when you're booking people on a platform like Airbnb, just because once a tenant stays for more than 28 nights or 28 or more than that, they gain tenant rights. So if they refuse to leave, you have to go through the whole eviction process. So having a signed lease just takes out the question marks that, yes, Airbnb should protect you, but having your own verbiage and having an agreement between yourself and the tenant is just a really good idea.
And do you only do that for midterm or for short term as well?
No, just for midterm rentals, because yeah, after that 28 nights, they become tenants. So with short-term
Right.
rentals, you can kick them out um as long as you go through the process with the platform, but you don't have to go through an eviction process if they're only staying there for like a week or whatever.
I've even had to go through the eviction process, not with my own personal rentals, but when I was working for the property management company for a woman that was allowed to live in the basement, an unfinished basement of like a tired old house. So like I'm telling you, it's a basement, not like a cute little basement that you can live out of, like mattress on floor
Oh
type of.
no.
Yeah, so she decided she wanted to make that her home, didn't inform us, the landlord and the
Mhm.
property manager, and the tenant on the lease was moving out. So they do, I'm sorry, uh, final inspections. So just to make sure what they know they're going to be doing for like a flip situation, they check everything out and they go in the basement, they see a person's living there.
Oh my gosh, that's
So
such a nightmare.
yeah, and you have to go through the eviction process because they've established residency there. They
Mhm.
got mail going there, they've listed it down at wherever they have as far as, documenting where you live. So technically, although they have not paid you, although they don't
Yep.
have a lease agreement with you, they've had squatters' rights.
Yes, squatters'
Apparently
rights.
that's a
Yep.
fucking thing. So yeah, it's very interesting. You really have to protect yourself. And sometimes even when you protect yourself in every which way, you tell them you can't let anybody in, you can't sublease or anything like that. People do it, and then that happens. So protect yourself at all costs is the bottom line.
It's always a good idea to have more documentation, more communication than you need, as just a way of, being more caution, having more caution going into the process.
Yep.
So other responsibilities that you would have owning a midterm rental obviously is furnishing the unit, and then turnover. So what turnover looks like is similar to what you would do with a short-term rental, where you're doing the laundry, you are inspecting the unit, making sure that nothing's broken. You want to make sure you look at your plates and silverware, and that they don't have food and things on them. But the plus side is that it's not happening as often as a short-term rental. At a minimum, it's happening on a monthly basis, preferably more than that. So getting into the listing itself, it's very similar to how you would list a short-term rental. You want to be super descriptive. You want to let people know what the benefits of staying at your place would be, what the amenities are around, all the things that we discussed earlier, except keeping in mind that the types of tenants that you're going to be getting are often people traveling for work or who are working remote. And so you want to have that mindset of like, you're offering a workspace, or, it's really close to like downtown and you have really fast internet and all of these things. And then we talked about having like a super fun, creative title for your short-term rental, like the monochrome home. That's not really as important when you have a midterm rental. You want to be more descriptive. So when we switched our short-term rental to a midterm rental, this was during 2020, and COVID was a big thing. And so traveling nurses were making a big appearance, especially in larger cities like the Twin Cities. And so with having a creative name like monochrome home, we changed that to be more descriptive. For this one, we kept it the monochrome home, but said 2 bed, 1 bath unit for healthcare professionals. And so that automatically, like for people who are traveling nurses, they're like, okay, that's perfect for me. And then you can, so with that, when you're listing like on Airbnb, you want to change your available nights from your minimum stays to like 1 to 2 nights or whatever you had to be minimum of 28 nights. And so when people are just looking for a weekend, your listing's not popping up. You don't have to deal with people who aren't relevant to your strategy. Then as far as what platforms you want to be on and finding tenants, I mentioned Airbnb because it's free to list your rental. And then also we had already gained and maintained our superhost status. And we talked about how great it is to be a superhost and what sort of benefits you have with that. So having a free place where you can put your listing is great. Airbnb has a really nice, easy platform to navigate where you can read the description, read the house rules, see the calendar availability, and see the price all ahead of time. And we get some of our leads from Airbnb, but I would say a bigger lead finding place that we have our rentals listed is on Furnished Finder. Furnished Finder is specifically a platform that is used for people looking for longer term stays, so like a month to several months. These are people who are, for example, traveling nurses, or people who are looking to work remote for a long period of time. The thing is, you do pay a yearly fee to have a listing on Furnished Finder, and you pay a fee per listing. So what the sort of loophole that we have found, because all of our units are very close to each other, we have 4 units available that we run as midterm rentals, and they're within 4 minutes of each other or in the same building. So we'll only list 1 unit. We only have to pay the yearly fee 1 time, and we'll just keep the calendar open. And so if we get people who are requesting information on that unit, but we have that specific one booked, we can say, oh, sorry, this one's not available, but we have a similar unit in the same neighborhood that is available for your dates. And then we'll send them the Airbnb link because that's free to list. And then they can see all the pictures, all of the information, see that we're super hosts, see all of our reviews. And then we only have to pay the fee one time.
Very smart.
Yes. So with Furnished Finder, you can, it's a little bit different with Airbnb. So you can search for tenants where on Airbnb only guests can search for your listing. You can't reach out to people. So they can have their own profile that's saying, hey, I'm going to be in St. Paul from July 1st to November 1st. I'm looking for a rental for myself and my husband. And then you can automatically see like, oh, this looks like it could be a, good fit. And you can reach out to them, but they can also reach out to you and look for your listing. So it goes both ways, which is really nice. Although you can get your leads from Furnished Finder, you don't book on the platform. So that's just a way for you to find each other and communicate. And then you book off platform with a lease. So we use a standard Minnesota lease, but then we also have our house rules. Since it is a furnished unit, we have like an additional set of rules that we'll have them look over and agree to and sign with that too. So with payment, obviously it's not happening on Furnished Finder. So we use apartments.com to send out deposit requests and get the monthly rent and all of that. You can only accept payment. You can't send payment back through apartments.com, but we found that that's really easy and user friendly to use.
Do you ever get people that are maybe in between moving or
yes.
So
types of tenants was the next thing was going to talk about. In 2020, when COVID was huge and it was everywhere, and hospitals were just trying to get nurses to support all of the people that they had coming in, traveling nurses blew up. And that's why it started for us and it was going super well. But since then, we've started seeing less nurses as COVID has dropped off, but we're also getting a whole bunch of people like in a transition in their lives. We currently have a couple who moved here from another country and are looking for a more permanent place to stay. But this works out really great for them because it's a furnished unit. They can live here and sort of drive around and see what area they might want to live in more permanently. And then, people like going through a divorce who just need a place to stay and they need to get out. So it's really great for people in transition. We also are seeing other sorts of traveling professionals for people who work on job sites across the country and they're constantly moving. This is a way better option than staying in a hotel because at least with our units, we offer full kitchens. We offer a little bit more space. We offer like bedrooms and separate bathrooms. So it's not just like a studio, like a hotel.
Where my husband works, a lot of them do travel. My husband doesn't travel. He chooses not to, but he knows a ton of people that do like travel maybe like 10 months out of the 12 and they go and they live in hotels to hotels. And I'm just like, I feel like Airbnbs and like your type of rentals have that home touch. So I'm sure it's just if they get that option, because I know some people or some of the employers, they only give stipends if it's like an approved place for them to stay, like a hotel or whatever that the case may be. But if they were able to do an Airbnb versus that, I feel like it's a little bit cozier. So it's definitely a really good option for people that are traveling or in a transition time in their lives.
Yeah, it's just a lot better option, especially when you have like multiple bedrooms and you're living with your coworkers. Having a little bit of separation would be really nice.
Yes.
We're also seeing an increase in like interns and students who are staying here. So especially in the summers, we'll see interns who need a place to stay, but they're not planning on like moving all of their furniture and moving in for a couple months and then leaving. And a lot of times like there aren't options for them that are only like, 1 to 3 month stays.
Mm.
So we've seen a lot of increase in those types of people renting. And so we've got a good variety going. We were a little bit worried when COVID was going to end eventually that all traveling nurses would disappear. And then suddenly we have all of these furnished rentals and we don't know what to do about it. And we're not going back to Airbnb because that was just not sustainable for us, turning them into short-term rentals. So it's been really fun, and we meet all sorts of people from all walks of life, different ages, in different stages. And so it's been really fun.
Yeah, I bet.
Another way that you can find tenants is Facebook groups. We haven't listed anything on Facebook Marketplace. I feel like that wouldn't be super ideal for us because it tends to be kind of local, versus the tenants that we're attracting are coming from all over the place. But Facebook groups are awesome. There's specifically some travel nurse groups that we found. I don't think we engage on them as much as we used to or really check, but we have found a couple leads through those. Beware if you're a landlord, some of these groups can be really toxic because it's difficult when you're pricing a midterm rental because you're offering all of these things that a regular long-term rental doesn't have. And so nurses get a little bit up in arms about the pricing, because it is more expensive, but they get quite a lot of money from their like travel, housing, and food stipend. And so a lot of like the verbiage on these Facebook groups is nurses saying like, oh, landlords are taking advantage of us, like because we have our housing stipend, but because a lot of people who are traveling might have a mortgage, and then in addition to that, they are renting out.
Okay.
But that's not really on the landlord to cover, in my opinion. I mean, the housing, like no one else gets a housing stipend just for living and working. Like the housing stipend doesn't go to pay your mortgage. It goes for where you're living, and it's more than enough. We would always ask for our nurses to just like have like proof of employment because we're like, yeah, you make enough money. Like we don't need to see exact numbers. You can redact that information. But we've had some nurses not redact the information and they make, I guess I can just say this person who stayed with us was making for housing and food an extra like $6,000 a month.
Damn.
Which more than covers, like at least in this area, your housing and food costs for your midterm rental. So there's a little bit. So just beware if you're like on Facebook groups. It can get a little toxic, and try not to take it personally, and just know that like your pricing works for you, and if it doesn't work for them, then they're not a good fit.
I completely agree. Underline, bold, all of that, because I often, with putting it on Facebook Marketplace, you know how you can like reshare that into other groups on there. That's like the rentals available in your area groups and all that type of stuff. So I have done that in the past, and I get my feelings hurt because of how nasty people get out there. It's like, you are egregious and you're terrible, you're money hungry. And I'm just like, of course I'm money hungry, not in the way that you're thinking, but I need to make money off of this. Of course I do. But I'm not like trying to steal from you. I'm not trying to like, just like get all this money without a reason.
Right. You're putting in the work, you're providing a service. It's like a business transaction. It's not personal, but people can take it really personally because it's where they're going to be living.
Right. So I've just turned off the comments, and I'm like, they can see it, they can message me, they can apply. I don't need to see all of their hate, and they don't know what it takes to be a landlord, and they don't know all of the things I've had to do to make this unit available. So, I mean, if you can If that person can spew out hate about what I'm doing, then they can go and buy whatever they need to, and they can house themselves because I don't want to deal with you.
Yes, amen. Yes, so which is a good segue into accepting and vetting tenants for midterm rentals. What I had discussed earlier with short-term rentals, I still like to send out my list of questions, and I might tailor these to be a bit more like um like where are you working, and like what is the purpose of your stay, how long are you staying, how many people are going to be here, do you have any pets, things like that that might not necessarily be covered under like the assurances that Airbnb offers when you book on their platform. And then the great thing about doing this is people are looking a little bit ahead of time, so you're not just like you have an opportunity to talk to them on the phone, or I've even been able to meet some people in person a couple of times and give them a tour of the unit and make sure that that's something that they're, that it works for them. So ask your questions, but I would prefer to do it over the phone. That way, it's just a better way to gauge what kind of people they are, if they're going to be a good tenant, and if it's a good fit for them. With the lease agreement and additional rules, like I said earlier, I always send out a lease agreement. That's just the Minnesota standard lease. And then I have my additional rules that I make sure they are reading and signing to. Because it's a furnished unit, because it is more hands-on for us, I want to make sure that the people that we are having stay with us are respecting the furniture, are not smoking inside when we would have to replace all of that. It's just, it's just a good idea to have your list of questions and make sure that they agree to it ahead of time. You want to send the lease out before you block off your calendar, because we've had people flake last minute where you are, in talks with them and they're agreeing and they're like, yeah, let's do this. And then you send out the documentation, you ask for the deposit, and you never hear from them again. And then when your calendar's blocked off, then that's, time spent that people aren't seeing your listing and that it's not showing as available. And so one thing to note with midterm rentals is that you are often booking only a month, 2 months, 3 months maximum ahead of time. So when you have your calendar blocked off, that's crucial because you're getting a lot of last minute inquiries. And not only that, but because of your inquiries coming in so last minute, it means you might not be able to expect when your next tenants are moving in after the current tenants move out until pretty last minute. So it's just crucial to make sure that you have like communication clear all the way. And then something about if you're choosing to go this route, it's a bit of risk management because it can get a little scary when you don't know when you're going to get rental income, in 2 months, when you just have your tenant moving out and it's just like a blank calendar after that. But I mean, we always get so worried because now we have 4 units that are furnished. And for some reason, all of our units have been becoming available all at the same time. In January, we had 3 out of 4 units become available within a week of each other. And it's January, so people aren't like wanting to stay here as much as in the summer. And so that was pretty scary for us, but it always ends up working out if you do it right, and your listing is agreeable to people who are searching for these types of rentals. So just knowing ahead of time, yes, it's a big investment into furniture. It is more hands-on than having long-term tenants, but you do make more money. You don't make as much money as a short-term rental, but your like time management is ultimately a bigger payoff in my opinion, which is why we chose to go this route and have continued to go with this route.
So would you say that midterm is your favorite?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely like a niche that we found where short-term rentals were fun for a time. We did it for like 8 months. We met a lot of people, meet a lot of cool, interesting people from all over the place, but it was very emotionally taxing. It didn't allow us to travel which is ultimately the reason we got into real estate and specifically buying multifamily homes, because we wanted to have some more passive income coming in, and it wasn't passive. It was very much a job.
Right.
And since we had that furniture, we decided to try midterm rentals, and it's still work, and it still, requires you to be available, often enough every few months for each unit, but it's just way more manageable, and you still make a good amount of money compared to having a short-term rental. So yeah, midterm rentals are fun. We did it we transitioned our one unit, then we moved out of our first duplex, turned the second one into a midterm rental, moved in to our new duplex, had long-term tenants, decided to turn our basement into like a guest suite, which we run as a midterm rental. Then when our long-term tenants decided to move out, we moved upstairs to do renovations in their unit and turned the main floor into another midterm rental. And that's worked out really well for us 4 times. So yeah, I would definitely say that that's our favorite strategy.
Okay. You're selling me on it.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it is work, and it's definitely an adjustment if you're only used to long-term tenants, but I would say that it's worth it. You just got to make sure that your listing is in an area that makes sense to do this strategy. Like, we're in St. Paul, which is near a whole bunch of colleges, near a whole bunch of hospitals. It's a big city, so there's just lots of people here and lots of businesses, and so it makes a lot of sense for us. If you were out in the middle of nowhere, then maybe that's not a very good strategy for you. So
Right. I have thought about doing midterm for one of my units in Neenah. It's about 2 minutes away from Theta Care, and it's the one that I referenced to in episode 2, I believe. So it's a 1 bedroom upper and 3 bedrooms below, but the 1 bedroom is really hard to get one person that can afford it on their own,
right.
and 2 people that won't want to leave when they outgrow it, because it could be transitional, and I've only known long term, so I've always wanted somebody to be in my units long term, but a one bedroom is really hard to make a long term rental.
Yeah.
Luckily, we've done it. We've had it filled. We haven't had any lapse in somebody being in there renting it, which has been awesome. But it's one of my main concerns with my rental units. That one is the one that I think that if I were ever to do a midterm, it would be the right one to do.
Yeah, definitely. Those smaller units that are hard to rent out long term are perfect. And especially like near a hospital or near a busier area is perfect for midterm rentals. And that's something that we have kind of kept our eye out, as we're always sort of looking at the markets and seeing what's out there, what's listed on Zillow for being potentially able to buy as an investment in the future. And we really like to look for like 1 bedroom single family homes or midterm rentals, because that's something that people buying, it's probably a hard sell, but it's perfect for a midterm rental, because often it's just one person or them and their spouse traveling for work. And a smaller space is all that they need.
Right. That is a really good point. I like that you said that.
Yeah. So if it ever you decide to transition, I think that's a good strategy. We can definitely talk more about that.
We shall talk.
Yes. So final considerations, short-term rentals, midterm rentals, it can be very overwhelming. So I will just leave a few pieces of advice to end off this episode with. I think your main consideration should be, how much time are you willing to put into this? How much energy are you willing to put into this? And then how much rental income are you going to be making from it? And sort of doing that analysis to decide what the best strategy for real estate is. Long-term, midterm, short-term. What do you have to offer? What can you gain in return? And is it worth it for you? And then also just what are the types of guests or tenants that you want to have. This is it's a really big thing. If you're super outgoing and you love, talking with people and you really like hosting, then maybe short-term rentals is the right thing for you. But if you want to take a more relaxed approach and you don't necessarily want people here who are just on vacation and might be wanting to just throw parties or just have a good time, then maybe a midterm rental strategy would be a better option for you. As I believe, promised in the last episode when we were talking about this one coming up this week, some horror stories.
Yes.
I don't mean to scare anyone away from doing a short-term rental, but I will say that out of both strategies, we've had way more issues with tenants in our short-term rental than midterm rentals. So people are here to have fun, and they definitely do that. We can try and vet them and ask questions and do all the things to try and make sure that we're going to have good tenants, but sometimes that just doesn't happen. And especially with last minute bookings, if you have like an open Friday or Saturday, you can typically charge more for weekend nights. And so we had a guy, this was on VRBO, message us, and they were saying, hey, my friend's birthday is tomorrow, so we wanted to have like a fun place to stay and celebrate here. And so yeah, like let's book. And we kind of like asked him his questions, and this is where I talk about him being like too agreeable. He initially asked if he could have like a little surprise birthday party here, and we said no, sorry, we don't allow parties. And if the maximum people that we allow in the unit is 4, we don't allow extra guests. So sorry, like maybe this isn't a good fit. And he's like, oh, you know what, no, it's fine, we'll just all get together in the city, and then only 4 of us will come back and stay the night. And so that automatically kind of like set off like alarm bells a little bit for us. But we thought, okay, I mean, there's no reason that we can say no to him because he's agreeing to it. And so we're kind of just like feeling a little uncomfortable about it, but whatever, it was fine. The next day, Saturday, rolls around, and I actually happened to be outside when the guy showed up, so it was just him and his friend, and I like walked him through to like get the keys and everything, met them in person, which is always a good idea for them just to see you as a person,
Right.
and just like someone behind the messaging on Airbnb or whatever. And then they left. And so Alex and I went about our day, and it was actually our anniversary. It was like our 7-year and 8-year anniversary or something like that. And so
claps to that.
Yeah. And so I think we were planning on like celebrating more like the next weekend, or we were planning a trip, but we just like went out and got takeout. And we were planning on coming home and like watching the Wild hockey game. And we had security cameras on, like I described earlier, on the front door and the garage. And we kind of like kept them up because we got weird vibes from this guy. And we noticed more people streaming in and out. So it was going both ways. And so we're like, how many people are here actually? And we had to like, okay, red shirt, black shirt,
Oh my God.
green shoes, whatever, and try and like count, because they were just kind of like in and out the whole time. And they weren't necessarily being loud, but so we ended up counting. We're like, okay, there's definitely more than 4 people here. And so we got on the phone with VRBO, and we were kind of just telling them like, this is a situation, like we don't want them to stay here, they're throwing a party, they're breaking our rules. And so my biggest piece of advice is, if you're running a short-term rental, is to have exterior cameras, because they asked us to prove it. And because we had our cameras, we could go back and download the footage of showing how many different people were coming in the property, and then we could kick them out. So before, I believe we were trying to give him the benefit of the doubt And we walked downstairs and we're like, hey, how many people do you have here? Like, it definitely seems like you have more than 4. And he's like, oh no, it's just 4, I promise. And then, we went back and saw more people come in. And so then we called VRBO, and then they're like, okay, sounds good. We will cancel the reservation on our end. You can go downstairs and kick them out. And so we went downstairs, we knocked on the door, and it just got silent. Like you could hear it was just silent, and then no one answered for a long time. And then the guy who booked the reservation opens the door just a little bit, and he's like, yeah, hey, what's up? And I was pissed at this point because it's our anniversary. It's now like super late at night, and we're dealing
And you
with
made
this.
it a point to
We
like
made it a point. We asked, he
Right.
agreed. He said, nope, we're not throwing a party here.
Right.
And we said, like, we have proof that there's more than 4 people here. We called VRBO and your reservation is canceled. You have to leave. And he opens the door wider, and like, I don't know if this guy was even 18, but he opens the door and like, he's pissed. And all of a sudden, like, so Alex and I barge in and we're like, you guys got to get your stuff and get out. And people start coming out of closets and bedrooms and the bathroom, and they're all just like streaming out. And they're like, wait, what? Who are reservations canceled? Like, who canceled it? And we're like, I did, because you guys are breaking the rules. Like, you need to leave.
Yeah.
And so they were super pissed, and like they were just kind of like grumbling, and they started walking out. And then the guy who booked the reservation on his way out like gave me a nice middle finger, and he's like, I don't know, swearing at me. I'm just like, this is literally your fault. Like, you ruined your friend's surprise birthday party, because like, this is not my fault, because you knew the rules and you decided that you didn't want to follow them.
Right.
So that was definitely one of the more stressful things that we've had to deal with.
The fact that you were like, we don't allow this, and he was like, oh, okay, then I'll switch up the plan, so that he definitely knew, and he was like,
he was aware.
Right. And he was trying to be compliant, even though he had no intention of being compliant.
Right. Yeah, just trying to like pull one over on us, which is super annoying. Not to say that we haven't had issues with midterm rentals too. When we were like initially trying to figure out our pricing, we priced ourselves too low and got stuck with someone who thought that like, hey, this is a great deal for a month, and showed up, destroyed the place. I mean, we spent like 7 hours cleaning. It was disgusting. Just like, I could not even walk on the floor without sliding on things, crumbs, I don't even know. And they ended up leaving after a week because we came to a mutual agreement that it wasn't a good fit.
Oh my gosh.
So suggestions for those would be price yourself properly, have security cameras on the property, consider your time and energy versus what you're making back, consider what types of guests you want to have. Are you introverted and non-confrontational by nature? Those are all things that you should consider. Not to say the last one you can't work on, because I've definitely worked on that one a lot, but that is a bit about short-term and midterm rentals.
Great job. Thank you so much for all of that great information. I sure learned a lot. I'm hoping that everybody that is listening learned a lot and had a lot of great takeaways. And I'm just really excited for this journey, because I'm learning so much, and I love to learn, especially with things that I'm really passionate about, like passive income, and especially this stream of passive income.
I'm glad that you found it helpful, and hopefully our listeners found it helpful too, because that's honestly something that I could talk about for hours and hours. So I was trying to squeeze it into like this podcast episode. I hope
it's hard.
Justice. Yeah. Hope I gave enough like information.
Right. Yeah. And that, I feel like when we have recorded these episodes, it's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg, and we have so much more, but it's also a lot of content at the same time. So
yeah, exactly. So because this is such a big passion of ours in real estate specifically, we've been focusing on real estate for these first couple episodes, and I think we'll continue to do so for the next few. That's not to say that we don't have more to offer in terms of passive income. We will definitely be talking about, being business owners and our side hustles and all sorts of stuff in the future. But for now, you can look forward to some real estate content. You can find us next Monday and every Monday on everywhere you listen to your podcasts.
Ooh, thank you. Bye.
Thank you guys for listening. See you next week.
Passive Aggressive Income was written, recorded, edited, and produced by co-hosts and creators Mims and Lexie. We truly want to thank our listeners, collaborators, friends, and family that continuously support us for all the love we receive. If you enjoy our show, please give us a glowing rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram to see what we are up to. For any inquiries, please email passiveaggressiveincome2023@gmail.com. Episodes of Passive Aggressive Income are available wherever you listen to podcasts, so make sure to subscribe and like us on your favorite streaming platform.